All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to talk to you this Tuesday, and I hope we've got some new viewers. I did send out an email asking a few folks I know if they would subscribe and check me out, and some of them did say yes, and apparently did so. So if you're a new Halitics viewer, a new subscriber, I'd love to talk to you. That's what we do a little differently here compared to just about every other live stream that I'm aware of. I take calls. That's a regular part of my program. So if you get a chance, you're watching live, you have a thought on something I'm saying, let me know. 240-363-7190. Let's talk about it, as Dr. Fraser Crane used to say on Frasier. And apparently there's a new Frasier reboot. Haven't watched it, not really interested at all. So today I am asking a question. Are we all guilty? This is a little different from what I posted yesterday in the Facebook group Halitics, which said we are all guilty. We're all complicit. But I toned that down a little bit. It's more of a question. What is our obligation so that we won't be guilty of genocide, of ethnic cleansing? How can we absolve ourselves of guilt? You know, I am Jewish, and one of the hallmarks of the religion is atonement. If you do something wrong, then you try to make it better. You try to atone for that sin every year on Yom Kippur. Make up to the people you've harmed. Of course, it's much better not to harm people at all. Much better to take action to prevent people from becoming victims. Right now, 1.7 million Gazans have been displaced. That's according to CNN. There's increased risk of disease. You can see that refugee camp there may well be under bombardment from Israel right now. Our nation has been Israel's staunchest supporter. We provide them with war materials. We provide them with all sorts of assistance so that they can devote their energies to killing right now Palestinians, to killing Gazans. And my question is, what do we have to do? What must we do to try to stop this? Do we have to do something? You know, I'm not a big believer in that, I guess, the Kendi dynamic. Or Ibram Kendi, formerly, I guess, was a professor at Boston University, well known for his anti-racism formulation, saying that if you're not an anti-racist, you are a racist. I'm not really a big believer in that viewpoint. I don't know exactly what Americans individually are supposed to do besides vote collectively for politicians who are going to try to reduce wealth and income inequality and make sure that every American has plenty of opportunities to succeed and no one has undue ability or undue privileges, at the same time making sure nobody falls through the cracks. So that's sort of my view. But if you're going to take a position that we have an obligation to stand as anti-racist, to confront people every time they say something that is arguably dismissive, every time there might be a microaggression, we have to say something right then, speak up, or we're complicit in racism, then I would say that same must go for our nations helping Israel kill Gazans, kill innocent civilians, take over the West Bank, split up Palestinian land farms and communities as they're doing there. So what is our obligation? What must we do? I'd like to hear from you. 240-363-7190. It's very easy for me to come on, at noon and complain and wring my hands. But what more do we have to do? And it's one thing that I think is really important is we stand together, that every single one of us raise our voices against what both political parties are totally responsible, for supporting. There's virtually no outcry whatsoever against the Israeli actions. And to the extent there is some outcry, no one's willing to demand that we stop supplying Israel. The only way we as a nation collectively are going to stop Israel from more killing is if we say to Israel, if the president, backed, I think, by a united Congress, says, we're not going to give you one more penny until you take your foot off the throat of Palestine, until you stop with the settlements, and until you let in the UN, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, and every humanitarian group out there to help the people that you've done so much harm to. And until you do all of that and you commit your resources to start the long, perhaps impossible process of some form of atonement for what you've done, Israel, we're not going to give you one more penny, period. Obviously, that's not what's happening. Clearly, it's not. Israel struck another hospital. I believe it was yesterday. That's when I heard of this. It may have been Sunday. So another hospital, 12 more people killed. This was at the Indonesian hospital, also in northern Gaza. Most hospitals there are no longer functioning to the extent that they can maybe function at all. They're not providing any real care. The babies, you may have seen pictures of them in the incubators. I couldn't show you that. I thought about it, but I just decided I didn't want to show that. Babies in the incubators evacuated. Let's hope they survived. Some died, I believe. There were a lot of deaths at Al-Shifa Hospital because there was an impossibility of providing any kind of care. So let's hope that there aren't more from that hospital. Obviously, Israel has been hitting hospital after hospital. I guess they realized, despite trying to present the case, which nobody really bought, that Al-Shifa Hospital was, the cover for Hamas headquarters, the command and control center, when it turned out that all they could find was one hole in the ground. Maybe they decided, well, it must have been another hospital. Maybe it wasn't Al-Shifa. Maybe it was the Indonesian hospital. I don't really know. I mean, who knows what they're thinking? Who knows what's motivating Israel at this point? I can tell you one thing that isn't motivating them: a desire to save the hostages who are still alive and being held by Hamas. That's clearly not what is motivating the Israeli government. And why do I say that? Let's go to the videotape. This is really quite, to my way of thinking, an amazing video. And I want to, we're going to go into it in some detail because it puts to the lie any argument that what Israel is doing now is to protect the hostages, that this is somehow a necessary cleansing in Gaza because the hostages have to be saved. Now, of course, I want those hostages to be free. I want them to be released. But what Israel is doing is exactly the opposite of what would likely lead to their freedom. Let's go, like I said, let's go to the video. Here we go. And who always would say, let's go to the videotape? I guess that was Berman, right? Maybe on ESPN. So here is I think this is CNN. I think from that color, this comes from CNN. Anyway, they did a nice job. So I always want to give the credit to whoever provided the footage. So here we go.
My sister was re-kidnapped and now
Gilly Roman has waited 45 days for this moment. His sister Yarden has been a hostage in Gaza since October 7th, and this is the first chance for the families of the hostages to meet with the war cabinet.
I do expect them to be transparent as much as possible about what can be done. Okay, we all want to see everybody back today.
Frustration boiling over after 6 weeks and 2 days of questions.
It's something very hard. very embarrassing that I have to stand here facing so many cameras and I have to go to a meeting in order to hear answers.
All right, I'm going to stop it there and I'll get right back into it. But just think about this. Since October 7th, so it's been, what, almost 2 months now. 1.5 months of basically just a turkey shoot against the people of Gaza. 13,000 plus dead. 1.7 million people displaced. And no one has talked to the hostages' families. They're just camped outside the Knesset. So I don't want to hear people tell me that, well, Israel is just protecting itself. Israel needs to, respond. It's Hamas that started all this. If that were the case, if Israel's retaliation, its retaliatory strikes were designed to protect the people that were victimized by Hamas, then why aren't they talking to those people? Why aren't they listening to them? Why, as you'll find out in a moment, is Israel doing exactly the opposite of what the hostages' families want them to do?
But as the meeting was set to start, not all of the families were allowed in.
In Gaza, there is enough room for the 240 who were kidnapped. And in the defense ministry, there isn't room for 130 families?
For weeks, some families have slept outside the defense ministry to remind the war cabinet.
All right, I want to stop it right there. Look at that. I'm going to blow that up. Look at what is being argued by the people. Look at the sign that they have up. Cease fire. Exchange now. That is what the families want. They want peace. And that's the last thing that Netanyahu wants to give them. I'm not, I hate the term conspiracy theories or you're a conspiracy theorist because some conspiracies are true. Sometimes people get together and they plot harm and they do it. And sometimes those are powerful people acting behind the scenes. So it's not like there's no such thing as a conspiracy. But I generally recoil against the idea of some sort of a Reichstag fire, that there was a false flag event and a country attacks itself so it can justify killing other people, justify invading another country. I tend to be skeptical of such claims. And if you want to call those conspiracy theories, okay, I'm skeptical of that type of conspiracy theory. I doubt very, very much that Netanyahu plotted the October 7th event. I think it's very, very unlikely. But you do have to wonder about the use of that horrible events, the horrible events on October 7th, the use by the government to commit mass murder in Gaza against completely innocent people. And to come up with any pretext, say to bomb a hospital or bomb many hospitals. You have to wonder, well, what did happen on the 7th? I know there's a lot of questions and people posting on the internet, well, what really happened? And, I think what happened was Hamas plotted an attack inside Israel against civilians. And some, by the way, they also did target the IDF. I think they were able to do it. Israel had let its guard down. Maybe it was somewhat witting. It was a somewhat conscious decision. Well, yeah, maybe we could, we got attacked and we can use that to clean out Gaza and seize the land. And, have ethnic cleansing. Maybe there was some thoughts. I'm not saying that couldn't have happened. I don't think Israel planned it themselves. But when you see what Israel has done in direct opposition to the actions that would likely lead to the freeing of the hostages, you have to say to yourself, what happened? Why was Israel vulnerable? Why was Hamas able to kill all those people at that music center? Was it just a failure of intelligence, or was something else going on? We know now that Israel is not acting in a way to protect the hostages. Did it also it's deliberately acting in a way that is likely to lead to more hostages being killed. So I do ask that question, and you can call me if you want to respond. Did Israel act in a way before the attack on October 7th that was deliberately designed not to protect its citizens?
Decide that they will not leave and they will not let up. From Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, they marched to Jerusalem, picking up thousands of supporters along the 5-day march to the Prime Minister's office, a public pressure campaign to force a meeting with Israel's leadership. Adriana Adri's mother-in-law is a hostage in Gaza.
We don't have time. We don't have 1 hour more. We don't know if she is alive.
The Israeli military says at least 2 hostages were found dead in the enclave, 65-year-old grandmother Judith Weiss and 19-year-old Corporal Noah Marciano. Now, some families have their own fight. Far-right Israeli Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir is trying to push a death penalty for terrorists through the Knesset, which the families say endangers their loved ones in Hamas captivity.
All right, so think about that. The far-right minister, defense minister, says we want to kill those Hamas terrorists. We want them killed. We want a death penalty. Well, if you say that right now, because I think Israel doesn't have a death penalty, if you say that, then obviously you're pushing the people holding the hostages up against the wall. They got nothing to lose. Nothing at all to lose. And that means, hey, they're going to kill the hostages, they'll do it. Israel doesn't care about its own citizens who are taken hostage. It just doesn't. The Israeli government doesn't. The Netanyahu government doesn't. The far-right Israeli government doesn't. Do we as a nation, are we also guilty as a nation because we are supporting this government completely without any question, without reservation? Are we also guilty? What is our obligation? Catholic Jack asked me on, I don't think I'm giving away any secrets. I don't mean to be like putting him on the spot, but he can call in if he's watching. He asked me, he said, he didn't ask me. He put this on Facebook. You know what? We all know what we would have done, or what would we have all done in the 1930s if we were in Germany? And I don't know. I mean, I have fantasy. Look, I'm assuming I was a Jew in Nazi Germany. I think what I would have been trying to do more than anything else is get the hell out. I'm assuming that, get my family out. If I was in a position, if I were an adult or I were a young, an adolescent who was, 16, 17, fully grown or close to that, I think I would be doing everything in my power to survive. But I don't know. I have fantasies that fighting against a great evil like the South in the Civil War. I would go join, Grant or Sherman and fight them, fight the slave owners. I have fantasies. Yeah, I joined the RAF in 1940 and fight to save Britain. I mean, I don't know if I would have. I hope I would have, but I don't know. Well, right now we're confronting an evil that is comparable. I don't want to say, they're not quite the same. I don't think you could say, you want to say Gaza's a death camp right now? It kind of is. I don't think that it's quite at the point where there's an Auschwitz, But this is really evil. This is a civilized, an incredibly advanced country in many, many ways, an affluent Western nation that is using the full might of its military to slaughter civilians, children. Now, I know we're not doing it deliberately. It's just they're being used as human shields, so it's Hamas's fault. Well, we've seen over and over those claims being debunked. We know that Israel's lying about what was done even on October 7th. There were certainly no proof, no evidence that there were beheaded babies. Remember, that was one of the claims that came out. There were beheaded babies. There have been claims that corpses were raped by Hamas. There's no documentary evidence of that whatsoever that's been presented. None. There's no forensic evidence of that's been presented. But these tales are recounted so that you will be so outraged and so distracted that you won't think about what Israel's doing right now. Or you'll think, oh, well, I guess it's okay. It's not okay. And we do have an obligation to stop it if we possibly can. I don't know what to do besides, you know what? We should be out there protesting at the DCCC. There are a bunch of folks out there. I hope I showed the video. I'm not sure, where they were locked arms outside of it. Hasn't stopped them. Hasn't stopped our support.
10 Avigdori's wife and daughter were taken on October 7th.
Maybe instead of talking about the dead, talk about the living. Stop talking about killing Arabs. Talk about saving Jews. This is your job.
In Tel Aviv, the families of the hostages say they have a list of concrete questions, even if they know they won't get concrete answers.
All right, so stop talking about killing Arabs. Start talking about saving Jews. That's your job. The reason that the defense ministry, the reason that Netanyahu focuses so frequently on those killed on October 7th is to outrage you, is to distract you, is so that you'll have an emotional reaction that overwhelms any compassion you might have for Israel's victims, any intellectual response that would question why this happened in the first place. That's why the focus is on alleged Hamas atrocities. Now, look, 1,200 people killed is awful. That's a massacre. It's an atrocity. I don't defend what Hamas did. I will not try to excuse it. I ask those who are beating the drums to kill more Palestinians or to justify the killing, what should Hamas have done? What should people who are being persecuted, whose lives are very, very seriously constricted, what is an acceptable way to respond to that persecution, if that's your... All right, I just, again, they're not credible. The Israeli Defense Force is not credible. And when they talk about what Hamas did, you can't believe them. When they talk about hospitals being used as shields or being, undergirded by tunnels, you can't. It might be true. Maybe that'll come out. But just because Israel says it doesn't make it true. And with regard, and I just give an example, kind of proving this point, with regard to the Indonesian hospital, that Israel, where they targeted, they killed 12 people. So I think they weren't sure whether to acknowledge they did it or not. Maybe the question was whether it could be proven that they did it. So in response to questioning, the IDF said the troops had come under fire from within the hospital. So in response, we directly targeted the specific source of fire, but no shells were fired towards the hospital. Well, how could that be? If you directly targeted the specific source of enemy fire, which was from within the hospital, then how could you not have shot towards the hospital? Obviously, those two statements cannot both be true. The statement did not elaborate. So they didn't say, well, they didn't come up with some sort of, they probably didn't even realize at the time they made the statement that what they were saying could not be accurate. I think one of the reasons that I have some issues, or that some people don't, love my program or whatever, is because I think it can be really challenging. I am not a person who just, I don't want to say pander, that's awful. I confront people's beliefs directly. And that's who I am. And I understand that can be really off-putting. If you watch Jimmy Dore, he goes after people who aren't his audience. It's always us against them. Now, the them that Jimmy Dore targets are usually powerful people, like the woman on the screen right now. Not a fan. Neither am I. Or even a Greta Thunberg, which I am completely at a loss as to why Jimmy doesn't like her. A lot of things Jimmy does I agree with, I appreciate. I don't get his dislike for Greta. But regardless, he presents an us against them worldview. It's his audience against everybody else. And I think what I sometimes do to some of you is make you feel like I'm putting you on the spot, making you feel guilty, making you feel uncomfortable. And I do that. I mean, I probably that's almost certainly a character trait that would be better if I didn't have, but I do. So when I ask, are we all guilty? I got to ask, if you voted for her, especially, I'm not going to ask, I'm going to say, if you voted for her in the 2016 primary, you're guilty. If you voted for her over Bernie Sanders in the 2016 primary, you're guilty. What we're seeing right now is in part a direct result of the election of Donald Trump, which wouldn't have happened if Bernie Sanders had been the Democratic nominee, and the election of another neocon like Hillary, Joe Biden. So, yeah, if you vote for her, I don't know if you vote for her against Trump. It's hard for me to say. I did vote for Joe Biden for president. I wonder if that makes me somewhat guilty. I can sort of comfort myself by saying, well, Trump's even worse, which he clearly is when it comes to Israel, although not Ukraine. All right, let's hear what Hillary has to say. And I want you to bear in mind that the hostage families want a ceasefire. The hostage families don't want more killing.
People who are calling for a ceasefire now do not understand Hamas. That is not possible. It would be such a gift to Hamas because they would spend whatever time there was a ceasefire in effect rebuilding their armaments, creating stronger positions to be able to fend off an eventual.
What is wrong with her? I'm serious. I mean, what is going on with that kind of bloodthirstiness? No, we can't have a ceasefire. Keep bombing. Keep killing. I mean, Trump has said worse. And I played that video too. So I don't want people to say, well, you're just concentrating on Hillary. But she's the Democrat. her policies, her views, if not she herself, are very much in evidence with this administration.
Assault by the Israelis. So we're in a very different world. I don't think it had to be the world we're in, but that's where we are, and we've got to figure our way forward through it.
All right, so it didn't have to be, she's right, it did not have to be that world. We didn't have to go into Iraq in 2003 in response to 9/11, which Iraq had nothing to do with. We didn't have to go in there, but she supported that, and so did the current Democratic president. We didn't have to spend 20 years destroying Afghanistan. But she supported that. To be fair, Joe Biden opposed that. He said we shouldn't be in Afghanistan. He was right. He got us out with Trump's help, or Trump got us out with Biden, or together they got us out. So good for them. That, the world we're in now is a direct result of the destabilization of the Middle East, which both Republicans and Democrats have to take responsibility for, and for our full-throated bear hug of Israel, the complete refusal of either party, of the leaders in either party, to do more than on the margins make some slightly critical commentary about Israel. What's our obligation? What is, as citizens in a relatively free country who have who have some ability to make decisions for ourselves, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, what obligation do we have to stop this? I ask because I don't really know. I'm not asking you a question I know the answer to. I really haven't got it. I know that we as a nation, that we individuals, I'm sorry, I got a little ache, or what do you call it, a stitch in my rear. So I know we are facing a grave moral question. I don't know what the answer to it is. I'd like your help. Okay, another grave moral question we face. I don't want to say it's any graver because lives are right now being lost. But another very, very, very serious moral question we face is the destruction of our ecology, burning up our planet, our mother. This was writ large, we talk a lot about, or I talk a lot about, other people, I talk a lot about the big numbers, right? The Earth is hotter than, it's been in maybe millions of years, certainly in recorded history. The Earth, we've never seen temperatures spike the way they are right now. The oceans are hotter than ever. Millions of people are being displaced, right? They're climate refugees. So they're sort of big picture. Here's a smaller, let's zero in. It's summer in Brazil. Most popular music artist in the world, I believe, although some would say Beyonce, one or the other. Taylor Swift is in Brazil. I guess that's why she wasn't at the football game yesterday. She's in Brazil for a concert, and it's so hot, at least one fan dies. 23-year-old girl. So it's not some senior. It's a healthy young woman. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she had some health issues. I'm not aware of them. I said that. I saw a picture of her. She looked vibrant with her I Heart TS shirt. She's dead because of that heat, because of that heat wave. And it's not just like your normal heat wave. This is a real, this is record breaking. or close to it. No, it is record breaking. Let me get this clip up. So here you go. She did a show on Friday, which is when the girl, or I shouldn't say, she's 23, she's a woman. The young woman died. And you got to see that. Fans were not allowed to bring water bottles into the stadium. So that's obviously designed so that they have no choice but to buy refreshments in the stadium, right? Whether it's pop, soda pop, whatever you want to call it, Coke, or water. And one of the concert goers was, I heard them speaking about this. They said, it was really tough because we're all pressed in. It's this huge soccer stadium and there's just, 100,000 people there. You wanted to get water, hard to get, right? I mean, there were people actually on the pitch there who were giving water out, but it would be hard to get. Plus, if you had a seat or stand rather, if you were standing or maybe seated close to the stage, you don't want to leave. You don't want to go because you lose your spot. And they wouldn't let water. Now, I don't know. It was suggested that maybe Taylor Swift, I heard this. Nobody who would have known. And I haven't seen any updates. And if you have, let me know. Did she know about that no water into the stadium policy? You've got to I do wonder that. I doubt it. By all accounts, she's a very nice, kind person. She's generous. It's hard to believe that anyone asked her, or, I'm going to assume that's the policy of the stadium. Maybe they didn't want to bring water bottles in because they could be used as a weapon, as a missile. But, a little plastic water bottle? My suspicion, again, is, all these stadiums, I know in the United States, when you go to a baseball game, you can bring water in. They let you bring water in. May have to be sealed because they don't want people to have vodka. I think that's the argument I've heard, right? You can't bring those little Kirkland, from Costco or Nestle or whatever water bottles in because unless they're sealed shut, unless they haven't been opened, because people could put vodka in them. And that actually to me is a good answer. I accept that. That's fine. I don't want a bunch of liquored up, crazed baseball or football fans in the stadium with me. But just not to allow water bottles on a record-breaking day, 102.4 Fahrenheit, felt much hotter because of the humidity. Can't do that. But we're not going to excuse that. And obviously that was a significant factor. But we can't lose sight of the fact either that this is yet another example of the anthropogenic global warming crisis that we've caused, for which we are, as human beings, responsible. Absolutely. And I can ask that same question. What is our responsibility? What, as individuals, do we have to do to try to stop this new Holocaust? You may want to watch, if you haven't yet, Lawrence McDonald, my interview with him last week, author of Am I Too Old to Save the Planet? A Baby Boomer's Guide. So he answers that question. He says, you're not too old and you have to do it. I'm there with him. Okay. But, I'm sitting here in a studio. I'm using a lot of electricity. I don't have solar panels on my roof. I should. So, yeah, we're all guilty. I guess they're different. Both bottom lines are different layers of guilt, different levels of guilt. The cause of death for Anna Clara Benavides Machado, that's, I believe, how it's pronounced. Anna Clara Benavides Machado has not yet been announced. One has to believe it was heat prostration. and a criminal investigation has been open, and she is obviously an autopsy is being conducted. All right, one more story. 240-363-7190. I asked for calls. Hey, I said, hey, if you're new, call. I'm not getting them. I think the phone number's there, 240-363-7190. I'm not seeing any. And my system is set up unless somehow it's failing me somehow for me to hear the chime. Hear a little chime. You shouldn't hear it. I might hear it. You sometimes hear people hang up, but you don't hear when they call. I'm going to test it right now. See, I just heard it. You might have heard it too, because it was a little loud. I don't think you did, but you might have. All right, final story. So this is something I also posted on social media. This was a question which I kind of got wrong, but not 100%. So the question was, when did Ohio State, Michigan become the game? It used to be when I was a kid that the game was Harvard, Yale. And a lot of people don't remember that, which I kind of find odd because I remember distinctly in the 60s and well, I don't really remember the 1960s too well. I have a friend who's younger than I am who says his first memory was the Mets winning the World Series in 1969, which I find hard to believe. Although I guess it's possible when you're 6. And he's a diehard Mets fan. He's watching, he knows who he is. I find that kind of hard to believe, but maybe it's true. So I don't really remember the 60s. One of my first memories I always talk about is going to see the Poseidon Adventure with my dad. That was 1971. I did see, and I sort of remember the Jungle Book and Herbie the Love Bug double feature. And I think that was 69, so maybe, just maybe, I do have a memory from the 1960s. I think I remember when my sister was born, that was 68. I think I do remember that. So yes, I have a few vague memories from the 60s. In any event, I am very, very confident when I say that in the 60s and 70s, if you watched Keith Jackson on the ABC College Game of the Week, when Harvard was playing Yale, that game might be on TV. It was usually, I think, on public television when I was a kid. It may have actually been on public TV. But, he would interrupt Auburn, Alabama, or whatever game was being played that really had national title implications. USC, Notre Dame, just think of a late call. Maybe, I don't think it was the same week as Navy, West Point, but maybe Navy, Army, whatever. I don't know. But I remember Keith Jackson would interrupt me. He says, well, Yale's won the game, right, against Harvard. Or the New York Times headline would always be, Harvard beats Yale in the game, or Yale upsets Harvard, or whatever, in the game. So the game was Harvard versus Yale. On social media, I said, when did Ohio State, Michigan become the game, as you see in this headline? But I actually think I got that wrong. It's really not the game. The big game, by the way, for my California fans, I think you all know this. You should know this, is Stanford Cal. Is the big game. And I think that was a direct riff from the game, right? So Harvard Yale's the game. We've got to be bigger. We're California. We're bigger. Cal was the Harvard of the West, I guess, or Michigan's the Harvard of the West. I don't know, Northwest. Stanford, the Harvard of the West for sure. So if Harvard Yale's the game, we're bigger, we're better, we're the big game, say Stanford Cal boosters. Fine, you can be the big game. There's one big game, there's one game. So how could there be two games? Because this says Ohio State versus Michigan is now the game, as you can see from Colin Gay in the Columbus Dispatch from a couple of days ago. Now, I have to admit, that's not definitive proof that Ohio State, Michigan is the game, because this is from Columbus, Ohio, where Ohio State is. It's like if I'm reading the Ann Arbor Daily and they refer to the game, I'm not going to necessarily say, okay, well, then the game is Harvard, Michigan, Ohio State, because Ann Arbor and Columbus are where the two schools are located. I believe I read somewhere someone calling it like AP or ESPN calling Ohio State, Michigan the game. I was trying to figure out when Ohio State, Michigan became the game, but I have to be honest with you, I don't think it ever did. I think the game remains Harvard, Yale. And the reason I say that is because if you look at ESPN, and they're kind of right, isn't ESPN, what are they, the biggest name? The biggest name in sports is ESPN. I think that's what they call themselves, I believe. Or the number one name. The number one name in sports is ESPN. And so this is from the 18th, which I guess would be, Saturday. So they posted this right after the Harvard-Yale game, which you can see from the score there. The Bulldogs won 23-18. The 139th edition of the game. So there you have it. Harvard-Yale remains the game. Ohio State, Michigan is only the game in Ohio and Michigan. And perhaps only more narrowly in Columbus and Ann Arbor. Unclear. All right. That's going to do it. You had a chance to join me, and if you had called, I would have been delighted and happy to talk to you. It's fine if you don't. I just want you to watch. I just want you to listen. I want you to be happy. Click like. I didn't tell you. Click subscribe. There's that square, the white and blue square in the bottom right of your screen if you haven't yet. I'll be back tomorrow. Thursday's Thanksgiving. I'll be off. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. But I'll be back tomorrow, as I said, and I'm planning, I can't see myself not doing a free-for-all on Friday. Have a great day. Thanks for being part of Hell.